increase the size of the font because when this application was done in 2014, our screens were smaller, so the interface was the font I had at that time was okay, small but okay. But now with all these HDPI screen, you know, your large screen, it's almost not possible to read sometimes. So I really had to do that. But I can show you an example of it. But it's agree with a lot of control that have to be grouped together to make it logical and making it adaptable to various font type or font size was quite a challenge. That is, I finished and then I released it. And first feedback I have is from someone having a GDPI screen, you know, a high resolution screen like Surface Pro that has scaling, and with scaling, it's a mess. So I still have some work to do. Happily, I know how to deal now with the scaling issue. We've talked about that in maybe one of our first Friday calls to find the screen resolution of the user, and then adapt or divide all your reduce or augment. I remember all your numbers that you get from the command. Not win move, but the command where you get the position, is it? The
win the position?
Yes. Yes, win get buzz is does not take into account the scaling. So
right, it doesn't. Yeah.
You have to divide it by a ratio that is 96 compared to the actual DPI of the screen.
Yeah.
So it's a little formula, but once you understand that, it's easy to implement. But I still have to do that. But what was funny, what I've done is that I have to group things in columns. So I add a function that return before I give a position to a control. I have a function that creates a temporary GUI that will create this control and return the size of the control. And then if I have 4 controls to put in the same column, I will send to this function the four control content, the text that will be contained in this control, and the function will return what is the largest, the widest of these controls, so that I know that my column has to have a given width to contain every content, regardless of the font, regardless of the translation that could be done later, because in French it's always, I would say, 20 or 50% longer than in English. So you always have to take into account that it could be longer in other languages. So it's a nice function that I could share if we have that.
Oh wow!
It's not rocket science. It's not rocket science. It's just.
No, let me tell you, I'm really interested in this because that is kind of like one of the biggest issues that we have with GUIs in AutoHot Key. As AutoHot Key is only using the Windows 32 API GUIs, like it's just using those, and those are not developed with this fluency in mind. At the time, they were all
it's not liquid as we say in HTML.
For example, So we have a lot of manual work to do, and there has been a lot of effort. I remember there was the first effort that I know of. It was the attach function. I think it was created by either Tank or Paulie, one of the guys on the forums that he created a lot of those weird functions. And the attach function allowed you to have allow you to move the GUI, and the controls would position themselves to that location, right? But
yeah, there's a lot of code to put in the GUI size command to adapt your content. Yeah.
But not only the
width,
not only the GUI that you're moving, but actually move the controls or control all of them, right? So it was a little bit. That was the first effort that I saw, but it always has the same issue with the scaling that you mentioned. So as soon as you have these DPI differences between computers, now we have a lot of weird things going on that I do not have much information about that. I'm really interested about what you have done with that.
Yeah. Maybe if you don't have questions, we could jump in.
Well, John, I'm curious. Did you look at the stuff I sent from Dimitri that he did for keeping track of the DPI per monitor? It was like, remember Isaiah's Ninja the
it was something I don't think it's maybe in the future. So thank you for sharing this. But it's it's if you have an issue with having different monitors with different scaling. And my application runs just on one monitor, so I don't have to deal with this issue. But another thing I think in DB3 you've done that is to create GUIs using objects, and a lot of objects, and having something very flexible with that. So that's the next step for me. I've done this GUI with a lot of lines, that could be, all this could be put, maybe, I don't know if classes would help for that, but at least having more functions and more objects would help. But if I share this with you, I apologize in advance. There's a lot of lines.
No, don't worry.
And when you change a number from 85 to 87, you have to change it in 8 places because it's not all.
That's one of the.
That's the next step to make this more easier to maintain.
No, but basically it is, and for the people who are watching, this is completely normal. You first write code that works, and then later on you optimize it to something that is actually more manageable. Yeah. But basically, it is not like bad coding practice. It's like, this is the first step.
It's not fun. It's not fun to. It's just not fun to present to others.
No, but basically you start with code that works. So you know it works. Then you need code that is maintainable for later on during your time. So, what does this? Like maintainable, right?
That works.
Coding is debugging, right?
Yeah.
Coding is writing, hoping, and then debugging.
Yes.
Because you hope it will work because it all seemed okay before you press run, and then you find what you have.
I was just.
Some of us pray too,
Yeah. Like and pray.
But basically, I was finding it really funny because he said, like, as soon as I released it, then I had this feedback, and I'm like, that's exactly what happens. You make perfect code.
Yeah.
The only moment that you will realize that it's not perfect is as soon as you release it. So it is impossible for you to release code that is going to work.
Yeah.
If you release it, there's somebody that is going to have a problem.
And code is like, it's like, it doesn't stop. Like, you have to support it.
Yeah.
That's the one thing, like, people don't understand is like, oh, I released the code, but I still have to, like, support it. It's
just a word for Joe. It seems that the streaming is frozen. I don't know if you look at YouTube, that's the same image that does not move at all, even if I refresh my browser.
Yeah, I was saying that to him.
We see the 4 of us, but frozen at this time. There we go. Fine for you? Maybe.
Well, Joe, you're like, do.
Oh no, it was paused. At some point I press space, I think, on that window instead of pressing space on Zoom. My apologies, Thom. Thom, you're quite in the dark. We don't see you very well. And I interrupted you.
Let's just say my upload speed was low, so I stopped Dropbox.
Yeah.
I just get the files for the course.
Okay, so the topic that Thom was bringing up was that about if coding is actually alive after you release the code, it's not like you finished. It never ends. So if you're creating code to share to other people, what is going to happen is that as soon as you open and share that to the internet, people are gonna complain.
Yeah.
All the time.
It's one of the, I hadn't thought of it that way, but what I always tell people, when you go to a restaurant, if you've never waited, worked in a restaurant and waited on tables, you need to understand how hard it is to work in a restaurant. Some people would complain, oh, they did this, that, right? And it's the same thing with the coding. If you've never written code and shared it, and then you see all the people who aren't even paid clients, like I said, hey, this doesn't work, hey, this doesn't work, hey, I have this functionality that like
should do that, it should do this.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things, once you start doing it yourself, you really, that's why now well,
It's
John,
easier.
I'll say, hey, I had an idea maybe you want to do, but I totally understand that you don't want to implement it.
It's easier to have an idea than to implement. And just finding if it is feasible, sometimes you have to think a lot. And I do it, particularly with access pop-up, where there's a lot of things existing that something new has to fit into that. You don't want to break something that's in the basics of the architecture, for example. Yeah. Do you have questions, Joe, on the chat?
Yeah.
Well, maybe I could share my screen and show you my CNC code.
I love,
give me a second, I'll be...
It always cracks me up in CSV, and people, when you ask them what it means, they're like, well, it's comma delimited, and you're like, yeah, it's comma separated values, right? But it's kind of ironic to me that the abbreviations we know, CSV, but no one really says comma separated values. They always say comma delimited. Right?
And many of them are tab separated instead of
right.
comma, or many other things. Yeah. Okay, I'll share this. So this function is get y this control. So it sends to the function. I have to send to what kind of control is it? Is it an edit control? Is it a drop down? Is it a label? The type, and then a variadic array of text for the various content of these controls. So I create a temporary GUI that will be destroyed at the end here, and I simply create. I set the font to the current font. Font is the same, depending if it is an edit or other controls. There are two types of font. So I set the font, and then for each label in the array, I create a control which is edit or text or checkbox. And then in the next line, I'm getting the width of this control. I'm using the handle of the control to get the information here. And if the width of the first control is larger than 0, I keep it. And for the second, if the second is larger than the first, then I keep the value of the widest of the loop. So, and I'm looping to the 4 or 5 items that I can receive here, and it will return. It will destroy the GUI, and it will return the. So where I'm using this is. So I'll show you the application, and I'll just change something to load some content in it. So here, the application is I'm using tab. I changed to use tab 3. Maybe you know there are 3 versions of the tab control.
Yes. I wanted to try it.
Yeah. So I tried 3. The main difference I've seen is that it's themed differently. So there's a white background here that you don't have in the tab 2. I think that I was using before. Mm-hmm. So in each of these tabs, I have a lot of control that I load. So the creation of this GUI is quite a big number of lines. And for this one, there are mainly 4 columns. Columns for the labels here, a column for the start of the edit control, a column for the buttons, and a column for the help buttons, and also a column for the undo button that I have to find something better as a character for the undo. But all the buttons are done with text, with character. And there's a lot of Unicode character that you can choose from, and the undo character in Unicode is not very nice. It looks like headphone, as someone told me. So, so I'll have to change that. But it's something I added. So if, for example, if you rename, I rename the last column here, I can undo this renaming, and for every for select, it is a little more complex to undo because here I'm removing a column, so I have to take a backup of the content in order to be able to restore. But for the other, it's easier. Anyway, I'm just jumping from one thing to the other. So back to the main topic is that I have to align all these buttons here. So what I'm doing here is I will return to this tab 2. So I'm sending to the get widest control function the 4 text labels that are rename, order, select, and merge fields. So these variables contain these 4 texts. Then it tells me what is the widest of those. Same thing for a few others. Same thing for the width of the buttons here. And this edit control is the one that will be stretched if I change the width. There's a minimal width, but it can get full screen like that.
Oh.
And this control here will not change. So you cannot have. I could have the 2 controls to change and make it percentages between one and the other. But in the end, what is it's this one here that could be longer. That's the new feature I showed you a few weeks ago that I was calling reuse fields. But I changed
the name for merge.
So for example, I could create a column here that will use F1 with some fixed text, and then F4, and the new name will be F5, for example.
We grab those two.
And this new column will take the content of column A, column 4, and add the text that I put. And I can also undo that. So that's So that's but in the options here, I can now change this label to Arial. I don't know how you pronounce it in English exactly. 15, and save it. And I'll have to restart. So you see all these labels are much larger. The buttons are also higher. And so there's a few hidden fields that will appear only if you select an option. Here, if you select fixed width, there's a new field that will appear. If you select HTML, you HTML template. So there are a lot of controls are hidden or hidden and visible only if.
But your function actually is taking those into account. So those oh wow!
Yeah. For example, here. This one is different. It's not the same type of control, so but the beginning is the same here. Yeah, so it's been the work for the last week. So that if I could share this here, it's to get the 8 for the buttons, and this one is to get the widest control.
On that, can we go back to the other here? So for the fonts, is just as a suggestion, and I'm not really sure if you have seen that, why don't you use the font dialogues from Windows to choose the font?
It could be, yeah.
Right, so that would be kind of like
I have to change this tab here to a real dialog box, something that is more like what I have in Quick Access pop-up. Something like this, with maybe tabs at the top, or so I could reuse the code I had developed to manage these tabs here, and have something more developed, but was not the priority at the time. At this time, but it's something that yes, every control here could be much improved. And yes,
let me see if I kind of like explain myself a little bit better. It's not like you create the controls. There is a dialog from the system that is already made that you can use to select a font, right? So instead of you creating the GUI for selecting a font, you can actually just call the system dialog for that, and you have the option of, for example, for picking colors, the color picker as well. I think. Let me see something. I don't think it's there.
No, it's not there. Maybe it's on the forum, but it's not in the file.
But here's the thing, that in the forum, there is a library that access those, but that is a DLL call. You just call a DLL that, so, oh, hold on, let me see. I mentioned that to, who was it? Oh, Dimitri, I think I was talking to Dimitri because he recreated uh, the color picker dialog. He recreated completely. And I was like, man, that is interesting. How do you, like, he did a very good job at it because it looks exactly the same as the original. And I said, right, but you could call the system dialog for color picker. And he was like, I didn't know that you could do that. Let me double check.
I did a quick search on the forum, but
yeah, let me see if I
search.
I showed him the library, and maybe it's a library that can be found on GitHub. So let me go ahead and find it on YouTube.
I found a function that that can return what is the default font for your GUI. The default font for your GUI in AutoHotkey is not the same depending on what OS you have. So what I found on my system that the default was Microsoft. Microsoft sans serif.
Here, there we go. I found it. So, so let me
share the screen.
Yeah, in a minute. So I'm just I'm not really sure. Oh, this stuff. But in any case, I'm not really sure if this is the original, but I let me share my screen real quick. So this is a library. This is the one that I need. So the system dialogues. This from Miles Easer. So he has a library, and remember that I was talking about the attach thing. So this dialog here allows you to the color feature. And once you use it, let me see if I could, this has, so this is the color feature, the find and replace dialog, which is from the system, the font dialog. This is the one. So we do have here, maybe we have kind of like examples of it. Let's see if I find the example. It is a huge thing. It has a lot of, yeah, so it is from the standard library and so on. Right. Let's go ahead and do this. Let's go ahead and
Can you guys hear me? Okay. I'm gonna kill my internet. Something like Joe's like jumpy, like he's like all over the place. You're muted. Hello? Yeah, Joe's, you're muted. Oh, okay.
So in that case, what you can do is you're gonna come back. Okay.
Yeah, I'm gonna reset the whole system. This is bad.
I understand.
It's
So
like,
it looks like what's good. Okay, so I would use this blue here, just like this, and I just use interconnections like this, and the color and the effects. I do not need anything else. I think that's good. Let's see what happens here. So this is what I meant. I don't know if you can see my screen. So basically, just by using this function, this is what is going to happen. When you call the function, it brings this dialog, which is the original Windows dialog for this. It allows you to pick a font and a color, and when you hit OK, this is saved into those variables here. And I'm not really sure what happened here with the font name.
Yeah, Unicode characters maybe.
Yeah, very likely. But basically, instead of recreating the whole group, you can just call the system dialog and just let them pick it like this, because that way you can even have a pre